people
Yeah.
think Hanukkah is some Jewish thing.
Yeah.
But is it important to the believers?
Yes.
For end-time believers.
Yes,
We're the end-time believers, right? How many are end-time believers? And you believe we're in the end times, too, all right?
The first two things. One is, in the Bible, there's only one time in the Bible it's recorded about somebody celebrating it, and the one who celebrated Hanukkah is the one that Christmas is all about, is Jesus. He celebrated Hanukkah. It says in John 10, if you look at it, it says, it was winter time, it was in the portico of Solomon, and it was the feast of dedication. Dedication, which Jewish people don't call it that, and Christians look at that and say, okay, what kind of feast is that? Dedication in Hebrew is Hanukkah. So that's where you get Hanukkah from. So he's there for Hanukkah at the temple, and Hanukkah is amazing because it's not just this nice little thing where children get gifts and all that. And most Jewish people don't even realize this, but Hanukkah is the most explicitly detailed prophetic revelation of the end times, holds the key of the end times, holds the key of the book of Revelation, holds the key of end time prophecy, holds the key of how to overcome in the end times. So there's so much there in Hanukkah. So let me give you, in fact, it's the only holiday of the Hebrew holidays that has the Antichrist in it. The Antichrist is foreshadowed in Hanukkah. The abomination is in Hanukkah. All these things are in Hanukkah. So let me give you the overall kind of story, and then from that we'll go to what it tells us about the future and where we are now and what we have to do. So first thing, Hanukkah is about the temple of Jerusalem. For Hanukkah to happen, Hanukkah is a gigantic foreshadow of the end times. There's an Israel in the world, there's a Jerusalem with Jewish people, and there is a temple. So in order, what it's saying, for the end to happen, there has to be, Israel has to be back in the world, Jerusalem has to be in Jewish hands, and there has to be a temple. That's the last part that has to come. Hanukkah is all about that. For 2,000 years, Jewish people, we've been celebrating it, about what's dedication of what? Dedication of the temple. So here we are celebrating the dedication of a temple that has not existed for 2,000 years because it's prophetic. It's going to exist. So that's what about. So first thing, what happens is that Hanukkah is going to involve enemies coming against Israel, because that's what happened. This enemy comes against Israel. His name was Antiochus. He comes against Israel with the Syrian Greeks, and they try to wipe out the faith of Israel. Antiochus is going to be a shadow of the Antichrist. Even sounds kind of the same. Antiochus called himself Antiochus Epiphanes. When you say, I had an epiphany, what that means is God manifest. He called himself Antiochus God manifest, a shadow of the beast. The Antichrist is going to be arrogant, brazen. He's going to actually, one of the things Antiochus does, he says, I'm going to make my whole kingdom is going to be all one people. So the Antichrist is going to seek to make the whole world one. So what happens is, you have Israel there. Israel is not fitting into the plans of Antiochus. So right now, the first thing that it shows, he's going to come against Israel, which is going to happen in the end times. But one of the things that people don't realize about Hanukkah is that it didn't just happen with somebody coming in invading Israel. There was already an apostasy that was taking place in Israel. They were already getting into the Greek things. They were actually walking around naked like the Greeks. They were putting gymnasiums in Jerusalem. They were getting into the Greek. They were already doing it. And so what that tells us, first of all, of the Antichrist is not just going to come. There's going to be an apostasy that sets the stage for him. It's not that he just comes out of nowhere. Everything's going to be leading up to him. We're going to see events all over the news that are ultimately leading up to the Antichrist. Well, that's the first thing of Hanukkah. So he declares that everybody's going to be one people. He is arrogant. He is blasphemous. So the Antichrist is going to be arrogant, blasphemous. You have the number 666, because that's man as God. He's basically declaring himself as God, man as God. And it says in Daniel, the prophet Daniel, he's the prophet who speaks about Hanukkah, and he speaks about the Antichrist in the end. Hanukkah is, a lot of prophecies have an immediate fulfillment, and then they have a ultimate fulfillment. Well, Hanukkah is the immediate fulfillment of the book of Revelation. So you're going to see a whole dynamic here. Antiochus says, everybody in the world, in my kingdom, is going to abandon their faith, abandon their ways, and they're going to embrace the gods of the Greeks. They're going to embrace me. So what will the Antichrist do in the Revelation? He's basically going to say, the whole thing is everyone must abandon their faith, and they must worship the beast. That's how it's going to go. But one nation does not fit into Antiochus. That is Israel. Israel always stands out like a sore thumb. Israel never fits in. It never fits into the world system, never fits into the United Nations, never fits into anything there. And so he's going to come against Israel. Now, one of the things that's a foreshadow, in the book of Revelation, it says the dragon, Satan, the dragon, was furious against the woman with the 12 stars. That's Israel. So what it's showing is, in the end times, there's going to be a spirit of increased fury against the Jewish people, against the nation of Israel. We're already seeing it.
Boy.
We're already seeing it. But this is all part of the mystery here. So Antiochus says, I'm going to wipe these people. I'm going to make every single one of them worship me, or I'm going to kill them. So what does Hanukkah actually has a revelation about the abomination desolation. So in fact, this was the original one. Antiochus goes to the temple of Jerusalem. They say he slaughtered a pig to defile it. Then he sets up an idol in the temple, or the temple courts. The idol was called the abomination desolation. Mm-hmm. That's when it's the first abomination desolation. It's this. Why? It's an abomination. Jewish people, when they speak, the word for idol in Hebrew is basically abomination. So it was an idol, abomination, and desolation because it made the temple defiled. Now it's no longer the temple of God. It's a pagan temple. They took it over. They started having all immorality in the temple, and they worshiped gods. They're gods in the temple. So it says in Thessalonians, he will set himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Now, what was that? What did he set up? What he set up was an idol of Zeus. Remember, Zeus is the king of the gods. And there's a link to the end time. So he sets up an idol. It says in Revelation, he had the power to give life to the image of the beast. There's an image that's going to come alive linked to this abomination. Now you have the stage set. So now the strategy of Antiochus was to persecute and wipe out everybody who's worshiping God. And so he puts up altars of the gods all over Israel, and he forces everybody you've got to worship this or we're going to kill you. And so the Antichrist, in the end, we know it's going to be a forced thing. No one buys or sells without the mark of the beast. So in other words, people putting them to the point of force. This is the first full-scale religious persecution in history, and it's a shadow of the end. And so if you follow the Torah, you get put to death. You follow the law of God, put to death. You circumcise your children, put to death. You observe the Sabbath, you're put to death. So he declares everybody abandoned. And so there were many who did abandon. But there was a remnant who said, no matter what goes on, we are not abandoning God. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with where we are going.